Welcome everybody to another Haystack Live. With us this week, we have John Kane. Thank you so much for coming. John is going to talk about Search Product Manager, Software PM versus Enterprise PM, or what does that hecking PM do? John has been a product manager focused on search technologies for the past 10 years. He's been a search software PM and an enterprise PM working on a variety of search use cases, such as e-commerce, enterprise, and site search. During the talk, please drop your questions into the Zoom chat, and we'll get to the questions afterwards. Also, so you know, we have the Slack channel, or the Slack community at relevancy.slack.com or o19s.com/Slack. We'll get you to the sign up if you're not on there already. And then check out the search-product-MGRS channel on that Slack community, and John is there, and we can continue the discussion and just join and talk about all things Search Product Manager. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to John. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Max. So I'm going to share my screen, and you should see a power deck. Can I get rid of this? Yeah, minimize it. There we go. So my name is John Kane, and as Max has alluded, my background for the last 10 years has been as a search product manager in a variety of different companies and in different roles and levels of seniority. After looking through a lot of the type of questions I got prior to this call, I'm going to talk briefly about the difference between the search PM and an enterprise PM, but not as much emphasis on that, more emphasis on just a product manager's role within our search community. One of the things I want to emphasize is this talk today is going to be more of an oratory type of experience because as I thought back on it, a lot of this is my own personal career, but also understanding how the search technology marketplace, if you will, has changed over the years. I'm going to come back to this screen at the end, but want to emphasize that we're all technologists and prefer to work in that domain, but our work is paid for by the business. And the users of our technology, for the most part, are people. And one of the things, and I refound this particular chart for domain expertise down to context. I used it in a presentation I did to a software company out of Norway. So we actually did the presentation in Oslo, Norway. And it emphasizes the fact that people come to search either inside your company for enterprise search or site search or looking for products on your site to buy. They come at it with a wide variety of context, and they can be, in some cases, a domain expert or a novice. Their experience with understanding search as an experience can be low or it can be high. There's a cognitive style. People come at this in different processes. There are some people that prefer to browse and other people prefer to do very heavy type of searching. And then there's priority, which is precision and recall. Some people want to look at everything that's available. Others are looking only for a very specific answer. And oftentimes it may be for casual context, or maybe research for work and a variety of things. So it always helps as a product manager that when you're presented with a problem, either from the business side or from the engineering side, that you understand it in the context of the person who's doing the search. So the agenda I'm going to cover today is in 5 parts. I'll do a bit of introduction about myself. I'll talk about search use cases as a horizontal technology, the role of search and product manager within the business or businesses, search and the business as partners and team processes, which is sort of more how the product manager will interact with the business teams and or the engineering technology teams. And I'll have some thoughts on the future, which I may have to update that a bit later. So my career, if you will, in this technology business didn't start as a product manager. I actually really got involved with search in 1998. This is actually the same year that Google launched on the internet. That year, I was involved as a senior support engineer at Microsoft, and I got an alpha version of the full text search components. And fundamentally, I tore it apart and understood it a great deal. And then I was able to essentially, in 1998, I did the first webinar on it. And later that year, I wrote a white paper on it. But it was very much database oriented, and I wanted to move to a more search focused career path. So through some friends through Miles and some others, I was able to attend the last FAST conference in 2007 down in San Diego. And quite by accident, I stayed an extra day, and quite by accident, I went to the America Cup boats and stood there and looked at them, and a guy came up next to me with a camera. We started talking. I noticed that he had a Norway-based accent, and I asked him if he was from Norway, and he said yes, but not that company. Turns out he was the chief operating officer of IntelliSearch, and they were going to be opening up a San Francisco-based office. So later in 2007, did an interview, and they made me an offer, and I pretty much moved into a title that I created, but in effect, I was sort of a sales engineer, technical person supporting the CEO as well as our one sales guy. Unfortunately, they didn't do very well as a business and effectively ran out of money. I then joined FAST, which is another Norway-based company that was later acquired by Microsoft and integrated into SharePoint in the 2010 timeframe. I was also asked and participated in a book on SharePoint 2010 and the components of FAST that were incorporated in that. Later, I joined Hewlett Packard as a BI architect. And through the first month or so, I wasn't that busy because they were waiting for a new director of search to join. And myself and John McGuire, who a few may know of, became his left and right hand for product management, implementing fast on hp.com. I was uniquely contributed to the first type ahead component there, and as well as related searches. And I worked with HP labs in China for that. Later, I decided to move down to San Francisco Bay Area, and I joined LucidWorks as the first and essentially the only search PM for Fusion. I also had a life-changing event in 2012 in that I had a significant accident. I was in the hospital for a good bit. We launched, so my role, I'll delve more into LucidWorks as we move forward with this talk, but LucidWorks is the commercial company behind solar, and they had a significant business challenge for replacing what was known as LucidWorks Enterprise, or LWE, that required the customer to essentially remove their existing solar implementation and then replace it with LWE. Most customers were not willing to do that. And my work was embedded in the engineering team. And also I was working directly for Will Hayes, which he was the chief product officer and later was promoted to CEO. He asked me to manage a 3-month beta program, and I was able to, I'd actually go out and get the customers and then bring them into the beta program. And I linked a developer with a sales engineer with an account manager for about a half dozen customers. This work was important. Will Hayes asked me to write a 1 or 2 page summary that was going to be reported to the board of directors. And ultimately, we were able to launch successfully Fusion at the end of 2014. I moved on and started working at Staples. This was around the time they were trying to acquire Office Depot, which fell through. I'm not going to go through a lot of the details of these different positions, but I'm going to talk about one thing from each of them that I learned as a product manager as I move forward in my career. One of the interesting things at Staples is that they were doing an online proof of concept. So they were trying to get off of Endeca and move on to 2 other platforms. And they had a framework that at any given time, you would get search results from 1 to 3 search engines. And so it was a live traffic, and whoever had the highest conversion rate was able to they upped the traffic. And ultimately, the aspect of that ended because of the Office Depot purchase was declined by the government. Later joined HPE or HP Enterprise as their site search PM. This was more of an execution type of a position. They had already selected the Google site search prior to joining, and within 3 weeks, we implemented the United States, and the remainder of that year, implemented about 44 websites in 12 different languages. I did not know GSS, and so I had to, learn that very quickly. And we had a hard deadline of September 1st that year, and my team met that challenge. There were some significant technical challenges around customer support documents not being localized properly. One of the aspects is that they too had a lightweight framework between the UI and the search engine. So we had the ability to test multiple search engines at the same time. The following year, Google pulled the plug on GSS, and I had a roadmap, which I'll go into more details in a later slide. That already talked about how to move off of GSS and onto Solar or Elastic, but Google pulled the plug on that. So then we started a proof of concept process with narrowed it down to 3 potential vendors, and ultimately LucidWorks learned that. HPE was going through some significant business challenges, as well as they were selling off a good bit of the business. One thing I want to sort of emphasize as I go through this, in every position, including the Microsoft position, the businesses were going through significant challenges. Some of the challenges had to do directly with search technologies. Others had to do with the actual business component. When I joined Zoox, which is an online dating site, they were in the process of trying to get a new investor to come in, and ultimately did not. They had the CEO put the company up for sale, and I lost a great deal of stock options when the Germany-based company bought them, and most everybody in the San Francisco office was laid off. The interesting thing here is if you went to Zoox Online and you put in information about yourself and then started looking for potential dates, there was no search UI. So what is search without a search text bar? And the answer is a recommendation. They would show you the potential dates based upon age, location, sex, and a variety of other factors. Last year, I started with Getty Images to help them improve their process. They already had a successful search engine implementation. They were looking to modernize it and work directly with the VP of product management for search, and were able to get them improved and get a product roadmap. But they had a significant business challenge there as well, in that they had no, there was a disconnect between what searchers were searching for and what they bought, because they would have a number of marketers looking for information, saving images, but they would never buy. They would take an asset ID and hand that off, and would be able to, excuse me, and the purchase ID would go to a purchase department, and then they would buy that directly. So I have a concept, and I'll show a screenshot of this. The a search mission can be thought of as an overarching series of search sessions. So working with a data scientist, we're able to have a unique relationship between all of the search sessions, and then semantically link them together along with click IDs to able to get to a successful implementation of a search mission by the end of last year. They were also going to open up a San Francisco-based office. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that never happened. And I'm actually working as a volunteer PM for a COVID-19 contact tracing application at this point in time. So one of the things I want to emphasize, and this may be obvious to most of the people on this call, but if there are experienced product managers that are new to search, this might not be as obvious as it is to everyone else. So I sort of broke down search as a horizontal technology, much like a relational database. You don't buy a search engine or a database just to have it. You buy it to build things and improve your site visits. So there are public-facing site search, e-commerce search use cases. There are non-public facing, which is intranet or enterprise search. And then I'll added a hybrid or specialized, which can be thought of as geospatial search, as well as collaborative search. Collaborative search is an interesting component in that we always think about search as a solitary thing. But the reality is we're doing it for some reason, either business or personal. And sometimes it could be helpful to have another person help you with search. And so it's actually more than one person sharing results, search and the search results at the same time. And I can go in more details than that at a later point in time. So this is a very high level single page screenshot of what I believe our search domain is going through either now and as well as we move into the future. Dynamic search or dynamic IR means that there is interaction between you, the person, and the search engine. In a lot of ways, it's like learning to rank. But the aspect that there are all the components are dynamic in one way or another. Your users are changing. They're searching for something that they're a domain expert at, or they've been asked to search for something that is totally new to them, so they're a novice. The queries will change. The relevance will change based upon perceived changes. And I want to also emphasize, while we look at relevance as a highly technical component, and it is, but it's always the perceived relevance of the customers that they consider as relevant or not. And to a large degree, it's what is in the snippets. So there's always have to be aware that any textual or image feedback is important. So this is a classic long tail, or the 80-20 rule, or the ZIF rule. This is where, if you talk to SEO folks, which is really the caring and feeding of Google, because they want SEO folks and marketing folks want Google to find their site and come, and in this case, look for music, an artist on last.fm. So you have a very long, very tall head, then you have the middle, and then you have the long tail. And the long tail is where there's potential value from the e-commerce side. And when you look at the long tail, you'll see a lot of multi-word queries, and they'll sometimes be just one. Find me the best music for a concert. And what you really want to do, look in the long tail, is you want to break it up and then look at any nouns or entities, and then essentially push those up to the head so that people find them more readily. So this is actually a really good understanding as a business, because they want to sell or have people renew their subscriptions. So I'm going to move more into the search product management side of things, talk about some of the frameworks that I've used over the years that are both technology based as well as PM based. And then I'll talk a bit more about KPIs, because I get a lot of questions about that. So I have two frameworks that I work with, depending upon the audience that I'm working with. And for a long time, I just called the one my 5 things. And the number 5 is important because you can look at your hand and then look at each of the different points and just count them off. So one of the things when we look at a search engine, in that problems and or features can be in all of these 5, not all, but can be bucketized, if you will, in each of these 5 components. This is less of an engineering component, more of a business, because you want to understand that when you talk to business people, they don't understand search technology at all. So the first thing is it has to be highly available. So if search is down, then obviously it's not working, and that's a significant problem. And there are fundamental scaling and components that have to be incorporated to allow for always-on access. It has to be fast. Typically, just on the query side, anywhere between 300 to 500 milliseconds. But again, it's wall clock time, so it's all of the components that the customer is aware of. Anything over 30 seconds is a problem. Relevancy, and there are different types of relevancy. It can be topical, domain specific, or content specific. Then there's the aspect of social or behavioral, and this is really metrics. This is where you're looking at all the behavioral aspects on your site. So when I was at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, they had a Vertica database with some 40 billion rows, 10 billion unique, and it existed of every search, every activity on the site, and search sessions going back to 2010. After implementing GSS and trying to move on to a different platform, I really, as a PM, tried to convince my boss that we needed to use this database in order to improve relevance. Unfortunately, I was not able to get the resource to do that. And last is feedback. You'll see a lot of people talk about data-driven decisions. And for the most part, they're looking at how we as PMs should have data that backs up our decisions. But for search, it's another factor. particularly with learning to rank components and even online learning to rank. It's actual data that can be utilized to improve search relevancy. So it's often real-time data, and you should always be monitoring this and improving this. So in a general process with a PM role, one of the things as you talk to either your external customers or your internal stakeholders is that you want to understand your target audience really well. Who's using your product? How often are they using it? When I was at Getty, I worked with a UX researcher and developed a series of, I think about, did in two surveys, about a dozen search-related questions that would help them understand what people are looking for on the sites, what they thought was really well, what wasn't really well. So it really is important to understand why, because there were on Getty, there were a number of people that knew exactly what they were looking for and found the image and purchased it. But there was two aspects when I looked at the search query logs. People were all over the place searching for Christmas items in one query, and then an hour later searching for Thanksgiving and so on. In one case, they're looking for a green background or white background or whatever. So in some cases they were struggling. In other cases they were exploring, and because they would keyword search over images is very subjective, and they would know what they were looking for when they saw it. So I proposed a different UI, an exploratory UI for those folks. When we detected that they were in exploring mode, we would suggest that they move into that. And I have, at the end, I'm going to talk or show I have a series of references. As a reference to a really good exploratory website for looking at images. Want to make the task as simple as possible. This is more for the business side, but I also would suggest you don't want to make it too simple. And the last item has to do more with the enterprise PM, which I classify as someone where the end product of your company is not software or not SaaS service, that it's more of, say, an e-commerce like Best Buy or Staples, versus a software PM. This is more of a where the end product is software that you sell. And examples would be, in my background, LucidWorks, IntelliSearch, and Voyager Search. All of these roles sort of come together over time. So I went to look, and I'm not going to touch on this too much. I went looking at some of the things that are important non-technical attributes of a good to potentially great product manager. And the very first one I add is empathy. That you have an empathy for your customers or for the business, and because if you can put yourself in their shoes, then that's very important. And for me personally, I worked at LucidWorks and interacted directly with their customers, but on the other side of the table at HPE, as well as other companies, I actually bought search software. So I have experience on both sides. You have a passion, in this case, for search. One of the things that I do is, and I'll show some references on how to do this. I have a component where a part of my life that search is my avocation, that I enjoy doing research about search. And I've been doing this for the last 15 years, where I follow all of the academic search conferences. And now I have enough experience in papers where I can understand where the trends are going and what is where the future is. As a former VP at Home Depot asked me to find where the search puck will be in 24 months. You should be willing to experiment and be intellectually honest. And this, you want to be truthful to what you show your customers as well as to the business. One of the things when I look at product management job descriptions, one of the things that I find not really there is that it's important that you be a subject matter expert, because when you're dealing with an engineering team that are experts, you have to be able to not only speak in their terms, but understand more about where the business is going or the technology is going. And I also look at search holistically. So you want to, it's important to have a very good search UI as possible. So the autocomplete or even auto suggest or a machine learning driven adaptive autocomplete will guide your customers to your content, because you know the content more than they do. And it's the autocomplete function is very important. And it's the first touch that you have with your customers. So here are some rather basic KPIs that I've put together that are, I'll call them more operational, in that you have overall goal. You want to increase visitor to site interactions. These are the general business components. And then you want to look at the searcher's behavioral metrics. What are the most popular searches, the top selected documents, most popular facets, and so on. And then you have the content. Specifically, one of the things that's important, do you have duplicate content? That's really not a very good thing for Google to find. But you also want to find content that is isolated, that is not found. So is there any content where nobody has clicked on it? I'm not going to expect people to be able to read this because it's a very long and detailed, but it gets to the fact that not every site is e-commerce based. And that particularly is true with HPE. The VP looked at the site as a lead generation. So one of the things I had to do is there were no conversions. So how do you know what a conversion is? In their case, it was a registration. Someone would come to the site, they would register to download a PDF, and then that information would be sent to a salesperson because they were looking at a $100,000 Blade server. But all of this that we're looking at came from a book. It's called the Book of Kpis. It was published in 2006, and it's an extremely good resource. What I've over the years, when I do this with different companies, every company has their own KPIs as a business. What we need to do is understand how search fits into that and can drive those business KPIs. At Zoox, it was subscription based. And so when a person's contract was nearing the end, we wanted to show them more attractive people so that they would buy another contract. For people that were not subscribers, we would work with them to show them people that were close to them, that they would want to have a date with, but they couldn't send a message until they converted to a paying customer. So one of the important things in product management is prioritization. There's also, prior to the last 5 years or so, data science was not necessarily an important component. These days it is. So this is sort of a very high level prioritization that I've used over the years working with directors and VPs. These are variations on what is known as the Kane O, K-A-N-O. The example on the right is actually hand drawn by John McGuire, who I've used over the years. The upper quadrant is work that you want to work on, high impact, high effort. The lower left, low effort or low impact is not really that important. So there are fundamental features that you need to add that may take several months to potentially even a year to roll out in production. So those are fundamental things that need to be worked on. And then there may be an occasional UI changes that can be done over the holidays, say, for example. This is one of the things about roadmaps is if you change one thing, you have to change something else. So you may be asked to do with less resources. So that then affects your schedule. If you have, if your budget is reduced, you might not have the quality. So when you're dealing with directors or VPs, it's very important to make them understand that if they change something, they have to take a hit someplace else. I'm not going to talk too much about recommendations during this talk, but there are components of recommendations that are being highly integrated within search technologies. And this is a good way for bringing long tail items to the head, as well as adding diversity, which is an aspect of serendipity, and bringing novel items to the forefront. Let's get that one for the most part. The diagram on the right is a search mission. So this search mission is when somebody comes to your site, what are they doing? They may put in a same query. They may generalize the query. They may rephrase it, which is a form of reformulation, or they may change to a synonym. So all this is what they're doing. So often we look at a single query. What's wrong with this query? It's not producing the best result. So it's important when you speak with your engineering teams as well as with your business team that you want to look at the customer experience, the search journey holistically. What are they doing in the entire session? There was an example that I used in a presentation of VP at HPE. Person started with Linux, then they changed to Course, and then they changed to Red Hat, and then they changed to HP 2345. Took them more than a half hour to do this, but they were looking for courses for Red Hat. And all of that was important. And when I showed it to SEO folks, in their course content, they did not have the word class at all. I'm going to skip a few other, talk about this one, and I'm going to skip further down. You have knowledge graphs for users, clicks, and an image taxonomy. So this sort of highlights the behavioral aspects in that knowledge graphs or graphs in general are really important in understanding. So you can think of everything that occurs in a search session as a graph. So the first keyword is a node. The first thing they clicked on is another node. And the edge is the time it took them to get there. And as they make changes, they are building a graph. And if you deal with a lot of anonymous users, you can, behind the scenes, build a statistical model and then use that to help the searcher find what they're looking for. And graphs are good technology for implementing that. And I'm nearing the end of time, so I'm going to skip over a few things. I will show this. This is a search roadmap, and it has different components, a crawl, walk, and run. And one of the important things that I'm going to include up here is a confidence level. In this case, 20%, because this was initially put together at the end of last year for work that was going to be done this year. So the confidence level I had in meeting the schedule was very low. And as we get more specific, then I increase this confidence level. And it's a very good way of making known to the business teams that the schedule can change over time. I'm going to just sort of, I'll share this deck, but I have a number of books and references that I think are important. These are relatively written in 2009, 2010 timeframe, but they're very good. Designing the search experience is more with UIs. Search patterns is very good. I would very much recommend this book, Search Analytics for Your Site. As product managers, it's very critical when you talk about how search contributes to the business, that you want to start your talk with the business at the back end. What are the analytics? What are the KPIs? What are the metrics? What are you tracking? And then that is what you use to build upon your KPIs. A variety of blogs, conferences, and one of the aspects that's I found at Getty is, are your customers struggling or are they exploring? So you have to be able to disambiguate these. This talks more about exploratory search. One of the things I think is somewhat overlooked is serendipity. And there's actually a a professor that teaches this, has a course of this in Norway. And then lastly, I want to come back to what I started with, that you are providing search technologies for your customers. The reality is the best search is invisible. They really don't come to your site just to search. They want what they want when they want it. And they are telling all of us what they want. And so it's important that we listen, and that's it. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, John. That was fantastic. I'm really glad you're going to share that deck because there's so much good stuff in there. And there's a lot of text that I can go back and read when I get my hands on it. And I really like the book recommendations. Folks, please drop your questions into the chat, or you can. I think we have 19 people on the meetup, so you can just unmute yourself and ask. But as host, I always get the honor of the first question. So I really liked you saying that the product manager, kind of stating the obvious, has to be a domain expert in the product that they're working with. So when you're coming on board and you're starting a new position with a team or a product, do you have any tips that you can share on if it's a new domain for you? What do you recommend to get up to speed as quickly as possible?
One of the I'll tell you what I do, and then because what I do might not be recommend the best way for others. But I can cite a specific example from Zoox. Even though I have a search background and I have in the past attended Doug's relevancy engineering course, as well as the learning the rank course he provides, which I highly recommend. The Zoox was unique in that I worked for the CMO, and she had a very hard stop that I could have no UI changes. But they wanted to improve proximity, was the location, but, and I didn't say this in the beginning, but they were actually using MySQL as a search engine. But they were behind the scenes implementing Elasticsearch. And prior to joining, I did personal research on what is out there in terms of papers on on dating, and specifically related to recommendations. If you buy something on Amazon, it's a thing. It doesn't have an opinion about you. So I was able to identify what is known as reciprocal recommendations, is where two people are on both sides, and you both have to get to yes to go on a date. This also works for one-to-N and end-to-end. So there was a paper that was presented at RecSess in 2018 by an Israeli dating site. They had the process they implemented, they had the data to support it. So how would you go about implementing that? You can utilize without a UI, so you can effectively use weights along with what is known as a star chart or a radar chart, where the different points were age, sex, location, and a few other things. So every location would get a specific statistical profile. But as you use the site more and more, we would make adjustments based upon age, location, and so on. So my way of doing it, to come back, is to have to essentially do a lot of research in the domain that I'm in at that time.
Okay, great, thank you. Question from Andy Webb. You said something like, "Don't make it too simple." Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I can. Um, this is something that's more for the software PM role. Um, I was at Microsoft and we dealt a lot, or I dealt primarily with SQL Server. And there was a very significant effort in one year to reduce the knobs. There were a lot of configuration changes. And so they went through that, implemented it, and what they found is the people that were experts um, in maintaining SQL Server, they didn't have the level of customization that they were used to. So over the next several years, a lot of these knobs got added back. Um, so when you are selling software, you have to understand, for the most part, you're selling to developers. Um, and you want to be able to have, um, if you're doing an API or good controls for the basics and implementing it quickly. So but at the same time, you want to be able to add a number of components that can be managed and essentially incorporate the developers more into your ecosystem, if that makes sense.
Great. Manny is asking, what would a typical week of a search PM look like? Is there a typical week?
No, I would say no. The like when you work with a team, there are team dynamics, and I didn't go into a lot of this, and I can add more to the deck on this topic. But one of the things that you're involved in is you're involved in with um, daily stand-ups, and I've worked with engineers worldwide, so you have to be aware of all their time. So you have the daily stand-ups, but then you have prioritization meetings. So a PM always is looking 2 to 3 weeks ahead, and then customizing that. And then you want to look at the longer term products. So you're doing presentations, in some cases to the engineering teams that can be fairly technical, in other cases to your internal stakeholders, where in effect you're trying to sell the feature. And the same is true for search software, where you're actually selling a new feature, trying to understand if it's required or not, to actual customers that would buy your product. But there is sort of a cadence. The daily stand-ups, weekly Scrum prioritization, quarterly prioritization, and that sort of repeats over time.
Great. Question from Hillary, and this is a bit of a long question, so bear with me for a moment. So in non-commerce-based sites, in Hillary's case, the commodity is data. What's the best way to determine if user search behavior is learned, meaning experienced users know how to use the search to find the things they're looking for, versus general user behavior, meaning this is how folks search, specifically concerning short form queries versus long form queries?
Yeah. Essentially you are, one, you need a search query log. You also need click stream data and combine these two, and that becomes essentially your Bible, if you will. This is where you should do a great deal of analysis on what patterns emerge, not only within a particular session, but across sessions. If you can do it monthly or quarterly or seasonal, that helps as well. It really, if you need to look at the actual words. You can infer a component of what they're looking for. Are they using broad terms? For example, in that case, if they just say Christmas, um, then they're exploring. If they put Santa Claus on a flying across, a moon, that's something rather specific. So in effect, what you're looking at is you want to do identify nouns, and you can do this via POS software. Want to look at entity extraction. And then with your data, you essentially build statistical profiles that you identify that the trends are real for people that look for a square picture versus a rectangular picture and so on. And then the next component is um, looking at what they're doing in that particular session. Are they exhibiting the same behavior that you have seen someplace else? And so you're doing a match. And this is where graphs come into play. And so you can quickly be able to discern, are they new? Are they a novice, or are they experienced? And be aware that a person can be an expert in one aspect of your site, say holiday pictures, but you ask that person to search for lamps, and he's back to a novice. So people go up and down that pyramid, if you will, all the time. Hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Question from Martin. So the book Search Analytics for Your Site,
Yeah.
that was published in 2011. Do you know of a newer publication to recommend?
No, or regardless of the publication date, this is still an excellent book, because particularly for people that are experienced PMs but new to search, because this is the answer I just gave about analyzing your data. Everything in terms of actually how to do that is in that book. It's a very foundational book. Is there potential for existing books that are more current? I'll have to look, but it's still it's a very good book.
Great. I apologize if I pronounce your name, but a question from Hicham. In your opinion, what is the biggest asset a search PM could have?
Empathy.
Empathy.
In a single word. It all comes back to really being able to put yourself in the shoes of your end customer, as well as be able to understand the business pressures and what it takes to make money. And so you really need a capability of putting yourself in their shoes. One of the things I found once I became a PM, and it was quite accidental, I did high-touch technical support at Microsoft. I did sales engineering work, customer-facing, and I've done built POCs and so on. All of that experience I was able to bring forward and use in a product management role.
Great answer. Question from, and again, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Niant. What is the scope of applying Agile methodologies to building out search or other data science initiatives, or building out a search system?
So different companies I found have decided to implement their version of Agile. In a nutshell, Agile was a new framework that came out because nobody liked the waterfall method. And Agile typically means that you are able to react quickly to new changes. So you have the sprints, typically 2 weeks, and then you do a deployment, and then you repeat. There are companies that are very rigid. You're defining size of the project. You're defining the importance of the feature, and you're matching that together. And what I found is there are components that I believe of Agile that work in the Scrum process, as well as is incorporated in this. But I'm not a proponent of very formalized method, because I find that it sort of gets in the way of the actual product features. Data science, one of the things I think are potentially available is to have a data scientist or a rotating person in the prioritization meetings, where you're trying to define what is the feature, how complex is it, can they do it, do they have the data, and so on. So they would be more, I forget the analogy, a chicken or a pig, but they would be there to contribute, but not necessarily develop.
If you don't mind, I'm going to actually elaborate on that one a little bit, because we have a lot of experience with working with teams as consultants who sometimes they have very rigid Scrum rituals, right? Where you're used to typical software engineering, and then you kind of throw in this idea of experimentation into the group. And this can, some teams are used to things like A/B testing and things like that, where you already have this kind of experimentation mindset. But if you're really doing, hard science, which is data science and also relevance tuning, things like that, where you don't have like this very coherent understanding of exactly what the outcome is going to be when you're doing a more traditional software engineering. So we introduce what we call, what is called hypothesis-driven development. And if you are doing, for example, Scrum, and you've got a sprint, and you've got a backlog, and you've got user stories, and your user stories go into the backlog, and you have your grooming rituals and things like that, and you carry them forward through the sprint, you try to chop things up. We talk about hypothesis-driven development as a user story is just interchanged with a hypothesis. And a hypothesis has a similar structure to a user story, but it's about exploration and experimentation. So you have a hypothesis, and your goal for the sprint is to prove or disprove the hypothesis through experimentation and measurement. And then you can kind of line these cards up and intermingle them with your user stories in your traditional Agile process, and then keep going. One of the hard things is chopping them up into sprint-sized chunks, because sometimes things take a lot longer than that. So there's going to have to be some flexibility there. But you can, for the most part, get a hypothesis and experimentation style of development into an Agile team if the team is a little bit open-minded. Question from Martin. Given the ML-driven advances to relevancy and search that are customer-centric, is it time where the search PM should tell business stakeholders, from now on going forward, we ban all manual boosting since it is mainly opinion-driven?
Well, my first thought is be careful about your wording and your approach, because you don't really want to tell a VP of product management what to do. So one of the skills that I didn't touch on for a product manager is negotiation, and understanding that there are times when you push, and then there are times when you have to determine what battles you want to fight, and it's I found explain what learn the rank or machine learning is to people that understand search, or they know they like it and they know they want it, but they don't really know what it is. So there's an education component, and I'll end with this analogy, and I've used it many times. Imagine you had a piece of string on a flat surface, very flexible string. If you push it, the string will bend and not go in the direction that you want. But if you pull the string will go in your direction. So you have to understand what is driving your stakeholders, and then couch your request in those terms.
I like that string analogy.
I've used it many times.
Are there any other questions? If you have them, great, please drop them into the chat. I'm just gonna make some closing announcements. I'm gonna try to make some closing announcements. So we don't have very many more talks this month. We're always looking for people to sign up and give talks. If you have something to share, and everybody has something to share, but if you lack the total picture, feel free to reach out to me and we can put something together. We'd love to have you and share your experiences and your ideas. If you're not part of the community already, join the community. Also, I'll give another shout out to the channel, the Search Product Managers channel on Slack. Some great discussion there on tools and techniques for product managers with search. Share these videos. The video is going to be uploaded to YouTube in an hour or two, and then I'll drop it on Slack and it'll go out on social media. Please share it around with your colleagues who couldn't make the talk. There's some really good stuff in here. And John, I'm looking forward to getting the slides from you so we can share those as well.
Indeed, I will.
There is a meetup for this. You came to the meetup. If you are on the call live, you can only access the link if you RSVP to the meetup talks. So if you are watching this on YouTube, come join our meetup and see talks as they happen. And we have an events page on the OSC website. That is all. John, I want to thank you so much for coming. This is fantastic. And I look forward to seeing everybody next time.
And thank you as well. And I'll be on the product management channel more often as well.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.